Become a watercolour whiz and paint this pepper. The colours I'm going to use to paint this green pepper are Winsor & Newton Hooker's Green and Winsor & Newton Permanent Magenta. These two sit opposite each other on the colour wheel. So we'll be using the Hooker's Green for the general colour of the pepper, and then the magenta will give us lovely shadow colours. The brushes I'm using are a 1/2 inch flat brush and a size 6 round brush. Okay, so to make a start on this pepper, I'm going to pick up some of the Hooker's Green and bring it into the central well on my palette. And I want just enough green, palish green wash to cover the whole pepper. So again, this is good practice for you, judging how much, of a pigmented puddle that you need. So you can see by how much I'm mixing, how much I think I need to cover this whole pepper and not run out halfway. Nothing worse than running out halfway. So I think that's about as strong as I want it, and I've got enough pigment to paint this whole pepper in this green. So I'm painting every single thing in this pale green, including the highlighted areas that you'll see. You're very welcome to paint along with this tutorial on your own and do your own drawings and things, but if you prefer a little bit more help, if you would like to have the actual outline, the grayscale and the coloured reference photo, you can click the link in the description below, and that will take you to a post that you can unlock, and then not only will you get this paint along pack for free, you'll get all my other Watercolour Whizz paint along packs for free for as long as you're a subscriber on my Patreon site, so it's quite a good save in there. So as you can see, I'm painting this all on evenly all over, and it's going to dry a lot paler. And it's then that we can start to model the shape of the pepper to get these lovely bulbous forms. Right, so we've got green all over, uniform coating of green, and I'm going to stop now and I'm going to let that go bone dry. Okay, this pepper is bone dry now, and if you want to be sure what bone dry is, just put that part of your base of your thumb on the painting. If you sense any coolness at all, then your painting is not bone dry and do not continue. Give it another bit of a hair dry or wait another half an hour until it's bone dry, okay? Now this is the exciting bit. We're going to wet the whole pepper now, and we're going to drop in the darker green. You can see by a posterized grayscale just how dark that is. So the stalk is clear, is pale, so I'm not going to wet that, but I'm going to wet all the pepper shape, the pepper body, and we're going to drop in all this dark area in a darker tone of green. It's harder to see it when you're looking at colour, but it's easier to see it when you're looking at this grayscale. So let's wet the whole pepper now again with clear water. Just wet the whole inside, okay? When I re-wet something, I tend to use the flat, the whole side of my brush rather than the tip, because that risks dislodging the previous wash underneath much less. Okay, so I use the sort of soft side of my brush. I use light strokes because we just want to glide the water on there. We don't want to scrub away at it, because scrubbing away would dislodge the wash underneath a bit too much. So this is key now. I want to show you how moist this is. See the shine there? That's about the moisture you want. You don't want it any drier and you don't want it any wetter. Okay? Now this also is key. With my brush, I'm going to flick it against the side of my jug of water, like that, just 2 flicks to get rid of any excess moisture. And then I'm going to pick up the gooey paint, sort of viscous paint. And maybe a little bit more water, and mix the paint to that sort of consistency. And that, I would say, is a pigmented mix. Okay, it's got some gooey paint but a bit of moisture. So a pigmented mix. Okay, it's not dripping off my brush. This is key. Now I'm going to start dropping in by looking at my grayscale image, which will help me as a guide. Let's start dropping in all those darker areas. Okay. And don't worry if it bleeds a little bit, because it will. We want it to bleed a bit because that'll give us some nice soft edges. So wherever you see the darker sort of grey on your grayscale printout, paint that in this now pigmented mix. Doesn't have to be exact, we just want to get some contrast, because contrast is what's going to make your pepper look like a pepper. Okay, so we've got that going on there now. Finally, at this stage, what we need to do is wipe out a few little highlights. So with your your 1/2 inch flat brush, I'm going to moisten it really well, and then I'm going to wipe it on a towel. So now I've got something that will absorb a lot of paint. So let's lift out some of those shiny areas on the shoulders of the pepper. Rinse your brush each time you're picking up a highlight. So I'm rinsing my brush and wiping it again to pick up a highlight again. And by doing this, you almost get back to the white of the paper. And as you can see, there's some very pale highlights on the stalk, so we'll wipe some of those out. You might have to scrub at the paper quite hard. That's coming off now. Sometimes the paint will seep back in, so you've just got to go back again and lift out the highlight once more, because watercolour keeps on moving. There's a nice highlight here. There's a little bit of a one on that far shoulder of the other side of the pepper. Just lift out a little bit. There's a highlight on this side of the pepper as well. So all this work is done with a thirsty brush. It's really useful. I'm just going to do that shoulder one more time, and then the paint is almost finished drying now, so it's not going to seep back in. So we should be fine. So this is only one of the stages. Don't think you're going to get it finished at this stage. This is just one of the stages. Lift out a bit of a highlight there, as you can see on that little edge there, a little bit of a highlight. And there's a few right on the edge of the stump as well. Highlights there. Okay, so that's stage 2. Let everything dry and then we'll carry on in the next step. Okay, can you see the shape starting to take form now? So again, once we got it bone dry, we want to check it's definitely bone dry, because now we're going to work on individual segments, on individual lobes of the pepper. So I want you to wet this big first one here. Only wet this first lobe. Because now we're going to do some extra darkening on this one. And as you can see, you can re-wet watercolour. It doesn't dislodge all the paint. It might start dislodging it a little bit, but not enough for you to not be able to get some extra foam going. So let me show you the moisture in that. See, so just that one lobe is moist now. So now we've got it in that state. Again, flick your brush once or twice on the corner of your jug to get rid of excess moisture. And let's pick up some gooey paint again. And this time we're going to pick up a tiny, tiny speck. And I mean, look how small that is. That is just tiny, of permanent magenta. And look, that gives us a gorgeous... I'm just picking up a tiny bit of moisture because that needs to be slightly more gooey. And now we're going to drop in this lovely darkened green, and magenta makes a beautiful complementary shadow green with the hooker's green. Then up on here we got some darker areas, and I'm just copying where they are. I'm going to share this out a bit so it's a bit wider, and it's given me a nice sort of soft shape because I painted it into moist paper. Just going to smooth out my brush strokes a little bit more. And you see we're getting the foam now on this pepper. What you can do if you want to soften these edges a little bit more is you can rinse your round brush and flick it hard and flick it on the side of the pot again, and then just touch into the outline and blend them out a bit more. Okay, so that's a bit of blend in there. Rinse my brush again, flick it again, and then just swoosh back and forth to blend that more evenly in that shadow area. Okay, so I'm going to now moisten the next segment, but I'll need to have dried this one first, okay? Right, so let's moisten the second segment here. We want to let that water just soak in a little bit until it's just got a shine, a faint shine on the surface. Then it's going to give us plenty of painting time to drop in those shadows. So again, if I show you how moist that is, there, you can see the moisture there. Right, straight away now I'm going to flick my brush on the corner of my jug so there's not too much moisture in my brush. This is important. Pick up some more gooey paint, and then a tiny little speck of magenta again, tiny amount, and that'll darken that green really nicely. And I can drop in some stronger shadows there and on the shoulder of the pepper. Now that's dried quite hard already, so what we can do if that happens is moisten your brush, rinse your brush and flick it again. So you've got a moist brush, and straight away touch into that dark green and blend it out and down so that it's not so dark. Blend it out and down the whole lobe of this pepper. Then similarly again, rinse your brush very well, flick it on the corner of your jug and brush this dark passageway up into the main body of this lobe. Just gently touch into it and work it down so that it's not so strong. So I'm showing you a bit of correction here now. Okay, so we've got that lobe done now. Then we can work them alternately. Let's do this one over here. I can work on this one because the other two either side of it are dry. So I've moistened that. Let that water soak in a little bit because it's a little bit too runny at the moment. If I can just show you, see that shine? That's a little bit too wet. If I drop some pigmented wash in that now, it's going to flare all over the place. We just got to wait like about 30 seconds. With watercolour, it's all about timing. You can't just put paint on any time you like. You've got to wait, and it's all about the amount of pigment. So I've flicked my brush on the side of my jug ready. Let's pick up my pigmented pigment now and mix it in readiness. This is a gooey mixture, and again let's pick up a tiny bit of our helpful complementary colour, permanent magenta, and that's going to give us a lovely dark green. And again, if you want to use your posterized image, you can see right, it's very dark right there and it's a bit darker down the bottom. So I'm going to drop that in. There are a few dark bits down in there, and there's a dark sort of line, bit of dip where it goes out of the light in there. Okay, and as you can see, it's bleeding, which is really nice. It's given us a sort of a nice transition from the very dark green to the lighter green. If at any point you feel like you're losing the highlights that you've done before, just take your flat thirsty brush, so that means a flat brush that you've wet really well and that you've dried on a towel, and now you can come along and just suck up any highlights that you want to get back. So let's move on to this one over here. Moisten this bit. Actually, I'll do the two together. Let's do two together like that. Just moisten that shape where the lobes of the pepper bend inward toward the stalk. And again, just give that a little moment now. Show you. See, there's the moisture. That to me is a little bit too wet, okay? Literally, wait about 20 seconds and it'll have moistened the paper nicely, and we can drop the colour in. So again, I'm going to flick my brush on the side of my jug to get rid of the excess moisture. Pick up some more gooey green paint. So this is a viscous mix, and then a tiny little bit of permanent magenta. And then this area, as you can see in the posterized grey still, see how dark it is down in there? So now the paper is literally, while I've been talking, it's just soaked in that bit more, which is good. And I get the dark green going in here now. Just trying to roughly follow the patterns that I can see in this posterized grayscale image. You can be as precise as you like, or have it a bit looser, okay? Taper that away. Now that to me looks a little bit dark, doesn't it, compared to all the other areas of the painting. So let me show you how you can correct that if you feel it's a bit dark and it's jumping out at you. What I've done is I've moistened my round brush, I've washed, rinsed it, and I've dried it on a cloth, and now I'm just going to very gently touch into it and suck up some of that pigment strength. See, so I've softened it down a bit, I've taken it down a degree, rinse my brush again, flick it on the side of my jug, and now wipe it. And I can just fine tune it by hoovering up. You've got to rinse each time, mind, rinse and dry it each time, and you can just diminish the power of that green. I think that's a bit better. Again, as an artist, you're always judging something compared to the other thing to make sure it all fits in together nicely. Right. What I'd like to do now is a little bit more work on this, this lobe here, but I've got to dry this one first, so let's just give it a quick hair dry. See, so this is how we build the pepper. Right, let's go in now and do a little bit more work on this other segment. So again, I'm going to moisten this area in here. This is a small segment. But each of these segments play their part in the whole, so we'll give this one a little bit of shading as well. So I've moistened that. There's the moisture. That's how moist it is. Flick my brush on the corner of my jug and pick up some more of that green again. Now I'm just using what's left in my well here, which is a mix of the dark green and a tiny bit of the permanent magenta. A tiny bit more there. Now I'm just about to put this colour in, but I can see that in the last few seconds that segment has dried out too much, so I'm going to come and drop in a bit more moisture, because I don't want to drop this dark colour into dry paper or damp paper, because it will not bleed and it won't have a soft transition. So just re-moisten that. Now it's just right. Let's drop a bit of a dark shadow on there. And that's all that's happening on that pepper. There's nothing much else happening there. Okay, so let's now go over to this side and this one. Put a bit more work on this pepper, on this lobe. So moisten this whole area. And doing these little segments will show you just how long you've got to wait. And soon it becomes second nature. Like with anything, it's just getting used to this way of working, and you get into the habit of it then. This isn't the only way to paint peppers, I'm just showing you one process, okay? There's many other ways of doing it. But this is a nice way if you're learning watercolour. It'll show you about timing and pigment mixture and paper wetness, which is all very important. Okay, so there's the moisture there, looking alright. Repeating again the same procedure. So this dark now is in here. About that. Now again, that looks a little bit too dark, doesn't it? So okay, rinse my brush, flick my brush, dry it. Let's pick up, just decrease the strength of that by just touching into it, and that will suck up some of that strength. Rinsing again, rinsing each time, and just dabbing into it, and this is how we can fine tune. So I'm showing you how to fine tune now with watercolour. Okay, now I'd like to do a tiny little bit of work on the stalk. So the stalk has got a few little touches of slightly darker tone there, slightly darker value or tone as we say. So let's wet the whole stalk. And I'm not worried if it touches in, if my moist brush now touches into some of the adjacent lobes, because that'll help it sort of like fuse in and bed in and make it not look so stuck on. Okay, so I've moistened that stalk now. That's the moisture you're looking at. Tiny bit of sheen on there. Now I'm going to pick up a very pale amount. See how pale that is? The colour I'm picking up. And I'm going to put it in where I can see some sort of darker shade in the grayscale image that I've got. And then finally some much darker green again for in this sort of area here. This grayscale image is great. It's like a roadmap, shows me where the darks need to be. Again, if any of those look too harsh, which they do to me right now, they're jumping out at me, take your brush, flick it on the side of your jug, and then blend it in. So I'm showing you how to do some very fine blending now, okay? Light movements and just blend in that green around a bit more. Okay, so finally now I just want to put one stronger layer of shadow in. So again I'm going to re-wet this whole first lobe here. By the way, if you're finding that your paper is starting to maybe disintegrate a little bit or get little balls forming, that's probably because you're not using cotton paper. Cotton paper is 15 times stronger than wood pulp paper, and you get what you pay for. If you get cotton paper, it really helps you, you know, as a beginner watercolourist. So I'd say treat yourself to some cotton paper. Right, see the shine on that now? I'm going to go in one more time now, so flicking my brush, picking some more green up. And a little bit more permanent magenta and a speck more water. So this is a pigmented mix, not a viscous mix. And this will be the final sort of dark green that I want to put in there and up on those shoulders. And again, to blend that in, now I've moistened my brush and I've flicked it again. And I'm just going to swoosh back and forth and press the brush in so that softens it a bit. And same on the shoulder there. And there's our green pepper.